G'day guys, welcome back to a new episode of The Review, and of course we are here to review round 10. A massive start to Sir Doug Nicholls' round was up in Darwin between the Gold Coast and the Cats, and we ended with the Demons and the West Coast Eagles. Now of course this is the first of two rounds for the Indigenous rounds. Great to see the Indigenous jumpers on display for all the games. I really like that idea. But let's start with the Gold Coast versus the Cats, and the Gold Coast Suns absolutely smashed Geelong midway through the second quarter, recorded their highest ever score and a massive 64-point win in a high-scoring game, 164 to the Gold Coast, 100 to the Cats. There was one injury concern from this game, which was Mac Andrew. He did receive a heavy knock with teammate Ben Ainsworth and came off with a leg injury and was subbed out at halftime. So that's really disappointing for the Suns because he's been massive this year, down back for them. But let's get to the game itself, and the first thing I think we have to mention is the fact that the temperature at the start of this game was 33 degrees. So bloody warm, would have been humid as well. Not the conditions that the Cats would really be suited to. My brother did say in the tips for this week that maybe the Suns will be a lot more accustomed to the conditions, and I think that just shined through throughout the game. Now both teams actually started quite strongly. Neither side really wanted to defend throughout the whole night, but in the first quarter it kind of showed. That was the early signs. There was 9 goals in the first term between both sides, but the Cats did take a 3-point lead into quarter time. It was a pretty quiet start to the second term until we saw the absolute blitz from the Suns. The Suns got 4 quick goals to take a decent lead and then ended up kicking 6 straight goals in the second term to take a 33-point lead at halftime. And the Cats, honestly, I think they looked disinterested in the second half. I think they were just going through the motions, trying not to do too many injuries because they've got a couple of injuries piling up. So I think they were just trying to cruise through and then get back home to Geelong for next week. And the Suns, to their credit, took full advantage. The Suns in the second half kicked 15 goals and were just absolutely sharing it around. They were taking the piss at some stages, I thought. In the last quarter, it was an absolute goal fest between both these teams. 7 goals to the Suns in the last quarter, 8 to the Cats. But the Suns in the end ran out by 64 points to win this game and recorded, like I said, their highest ever club history score in 164 points. Now, to the people who are saying that the Cats are done, I think that's a little bit hard done by to the Cats. They rested so many players, and after the first 10 minutes of the second term, they looked like they just weren't up for the conditions in the NT, I'm going to be honest. The weather conditions were unfamiliar to the Cats, and they simply couldn't handle it. I mean, I don't remember the last time the Cats would have played an AFL game at night, 33 degrees. So I don't think they were really up for it. And I think they were just trying to go through the motions in that second half and just get through to next week. Gold Coast did what they had to do. They saw an easy kill and they took it and they won convincingly, which is something that the Gold Coast haven't really been able to do in their history. So they got a free kill, they took it. This is what they need to do in games this season. I think they should try and get some more games of the NT, to be honest, because they know the conditions and not many other teams in the comp will want to go up there and play games. Let's move to the statistics in this game though. Noah Anderson top scored with the 139, Matt Rao with the 132, Alex Sexton with the 126, Sam Flanders with the 122, Took Miller with the 108, and Max Holmes with the 106. Let's get to the votes though, and of course, as everyone knows by now, we're giving a 3-2-1 voting system to every single game of the AFL season, and at the end of the year, in between the bye of the end of the season, the regular season, and the final starting, we'll be doing a live stream and doing a live countdown for the Boundary Riders votes. And then at the end of that countdown, we will have our second ever winner for the Boundary Riders medal. Obviously, it's the most prestigious award in the AFL space. I don't think I have to keep on mentioning it. So many players are getting hyped. I think we're going to have to make a live show and get some players to come around and have a red carpet walk down. I think there may actually be a couple of players who have actually backed out of going to the Brownlow now because of how big this is getting. But let's get to the votes for this game. So in the end, Noah Anderson got the 3 votes, Matt Rao with 2 votes, and the 1 vote went to Jack Lukosius. Let's get to Friday night Marngrook game for the Sydney Swans, and in the end, after a massive start for the Blues, the Swans were just a class above, and it was one of the best games I've seen from Sydney for quite a while, and probably the best game of the year from the Swans, even though I said that last week, and I think I said it the week before that. They are in some great form, Sydney. They won in the end by 52 points, 117 to 65. There were a couple of injury concerns from this game. Jacob Wiedering did get a massive corky into the quad and he was subbed out at half-time. And then Robbie Fox landed awkwardly on his shoulder and seemed to have dislocated the shoulder and was subbed out in the third quarter. Massive one for the Blues is Jacob Wiedering. The injury toll is racking up. I don't know if anyone noticed it. I mean, they mentioned it about 60 times in the commentary that Carlton had injuries. I mean, look, once, twice, 3 times, okay. But they mentioned it about 20 times in the space of the last quarter. I think every single Carlton fan and everyone in the AFL knows that Carlton have a bad injury list. But let's just give credit to a team that's playing really well. But anyway, let's get to the game. Like I said, the Blues had a hot start. They kicked the first 4 goals of the game in the first 15 or so minutes and led by nearly 5 goals, but the Swans actually fought their way back, and at quarter time were only down by 9 points. The Swans started to really get their game going in the second term, and the Blues' pressure dropped off and the Swans really lifted. The Swans kicked the only 4 goals of the second term and led by 14 points at half-time. Now, despite the Blues getting the first goal of the third term, this is when the Swans truly started to dominate this game. It was led by their midfielders, Chad Warner, Rowbottom, Heaney. All of them were massive. Chad Warner and Heaney led from the front, though. They kicked 2 goals each, and honestly was the best quarter of the year from the Swans so far. You don't want your best form now, but they are in hot form, so it's good to see for Sydney. Now, a 7-goal to 2 quarter saw the Swans take a 45-point lead at 3-quarter time. The Swans continued their form in the last quarter, ended up with a massive 52-point win. I don't think anyone would have seen Sydney taking a 52-point win against the Blues. So, really good performance from Sydney. The Blues have some question marks. I know they've got a lot of injuries. They'll probably be out of the 8 by the end of the round. I'm starting to record this on Saturday morning before the Collingwood Adelaide game. So, at the moment, the Blues could be out of the 8. And by round 10, I don't think many people would have expected this. So a little bit disappointing for them. Now, before we get to the statistics, I have to mention James Jordan's game. Because unfortunately, he actually doesn't get into the votes here. Which is kind of surprising. Because we're giving him votes in the last 2 games for his tagging roles. But there were so many Sydney midfielders that were just so good. So he just missed out on that 1 vote. He was so close. But of course, he has had this tagging role in the last month or so for Sydney. He's taken up Lachie Whitfield, beat him. Jordan Clark beat him, and this time he went into the midfield and took Sam Walsh. And this is why I think James Jordan is a very good tagger and is such a great inclusion for Sydney this year, and the tagging role that he's playing is brilliant because we saw Ryan Clark do it for Sydney a couple of years ago, but obviously he didn't have the ticker, I would say, to go through the midfield and take on a midfielder, but James Jordan has got that sort of spark. He's got that leg speed, he's got that brute strength that he can run through the midfield and take on midfielders like Sam Walsh, and he locked him down. James Jordan was absolutely brilliant in the tagging role. Locked down Sam Walsh, which is the first time anyone's done it this year. Have to give credit to James Jordan. He was brilliant. Unfortunately, though, he did miss out on the vote. So let's get to the statistics in this game. And on the AFL Fantasy front, of course, Isaac Heaney top score with the 121, James Rowbottom with the 119, Nick Newman with the 118, Chad Warner with the 117, Goulden with the 116, and then Brodie Grundy with the 99. Let's get to the votes though, and this was really tough to pick between 3 votes and 2 votes, and I'm going to explain why I've given the 3 votes to a certain player. 3 votes, Isaac Heaney, 2 votes, Chad Warner, 1 vote, James Rowbottom. James Rowbottom, by the way, had 15 tackles. That's why he got the 1 vote. He was massive, and he is playing a massive role for Sydney. Like, the classy players of Goulden, Heaney, and Warner can get away. Right? James Rowbottom just is a tackling machine. He's leading the tackles in the comp right now. He deserves a lot of credit. So that's why he got the 1 vote. But the reason why I've given Isaac Heaney the 1 vote here is because of his last quarter. I felt Warner was just in front at 3-quarter time, but Chad Warner only had about 4 touches in the last quarter, didn't have a lot of impact. I mean, some people could say that maybe Chad Warner was playing the best when the game was needed to be won, but I felt like Isaac Heaney had a brilliant last quarter, and that's why I've given Isaac Heaney the 3 votes. But nonetheless, both of them were brilliant, and right now they are polling extremely well in the Brownlow Riders medal. And I would assume the less important Brownlow medal. So guys, let's get to our next game. Of course, it was the first game on Saturday between Collingwood and the Crows. And what a massive game it was. Collingwood at one point did have a 30-point lead, but they just held on in the final moments to win by 4 points over the Crows. 78 to Collingwood, 74 to the Crows. A couple of injury concerns from this game. First of all, it was Will Hoskin-Elliott, who was subbed out at halftime with a hamstring injury. So that was really concerning there for the Pies because he's been quite good up forward this year. And we also have Isaac Rankin in the final moments when he made that big run on the wing. He actually pinged his hammy, so that's really concerning for the Crows. Hopefully it's just a minor one and he misses just a couple of weeks. But let's get to the game itself. Now, there are a lot of stoppages early in this game, and we only actually saw 1 goal in the first 15 minutes from Collingwood. It was a tight first term, but the Pies took a 7-point lead into quarter time, and Collingwood, late in the first quarter, through to midway through the second term, actually got on a 6-goal run in a row and took that game-high 30-point lead, which I just mentioned. But the Crows did enough to get 3 final goals in the second term and are only down by 11 points at half-time. Now, throughout most of the third term, it was just goal for goal, and the Crows, just unfortunately for them, couldn't get the margin into single digits. But with a late goal to Collingwood, they did break to a 17-point lead at 3/4 time. But the Crows did get 2 early goals in the final term to set this game up for a grandstand finish. And of course, we did see a brilliant goal from Isaac Rankin being their 3rd goal in a row to get the Crows in front for the first time in the opening quarter. The Crows tried to hold on, but the Pies broke through the middle in the final moments with a Degoe taking the mark in the forward 50, held his nerve, kicked the winning goal, and they won by 4 points. So a great win for Collingwood. Let's get to the statistics in this game, and top scorer in the end was John Noble with the 120, Matt Crouch with the 119, 118 to Crisp and Josh Dacos, Jordan Dawson with the 117, and then Nick Dacos with the 115. And now let's get to the votes. So 3 votes in the end I gave to John Noble, 2 votes went to Isaac Rankin, and 1 vote went to Nick Dacos. Now I know he had 41 touches, you would see that and think, oh, he should have got the 3 votes. But at times Dacos absolutely butchered the football. But on the other hand, he may have missed out on votes if it wasn't for the fact that he put on a lot of defensive pressure early and really set the scene for his team. But in the end, the reason why he's gone down in the votes here is basically because his use by foot was pretty poor today. Yeah, unfortunately for him, his foot skills, which are so much better than what he played in that game, so that's why he got the 1 vote in this game. After that, let's move to the Giants versus the Bulldogs, and the Giants really had another poor performance. It was a little bit more of a wet condition game, but the Bulldogs, a big win for them. They beat the Tigers last week to maybe get themselves back into a bit of form, and a real sluggish game for them. They performed really well. They won by 27 points, 70-43. There was one injury concern from this game, which was Darcy Jones, who was subbed off in the first quarter with a hamstring. So that's disappointing for the Giants. He's been pretty good so far this year. Debuted a couple of weeks ago. It's really given him a little bit of extra spark, but he will be out for probably a couple more weeks. So really disappointing for the Giants. Now let's get to the game itself. The Dogs had some big chances early in this game, but butchered their opportunities like they did all day. And with the little chances that the Giants actually had in the first quarter, they actually took an 8-point lead into quarter time. The Bulldogs finally started to kick straighter in the second term and kicked 3 quick goals to take the lead back. But again, the missed opportunities cost them, the Dogs. They kicked 4-4 in the second term and did keep the Giants 22-3. So the Dogs did take a 5-point lead into half-time. Now we had a really tight and contested third term, as we only saw 1 goal kick between both sides, and it did go to the Dogs. But the Dogs did miss some crucial chances. They kicked 1 goal 6 in that third term and just kept the door just a little bit ajar for the Giants to maybe make a charge in the last quarter. The Dogs did lead by 14 points at 3/4 time, but in the last quarter, it did really feel like the Giants just couldn't get any sort of scoring opportunities, and the Dogs really shut the game down. It was a really good credit to them. But the Dogs on a dirty day in front of goal, they kicked 8 goals, 22 in the end, which I think is like a 60-year record for them. They did enough to win this game by 27 points, but honestly, I think the Dogs could have won this by 10 plus goals. They were a much better side than the Giants. To their credit, they've got a 27-point win. They now have the 2nd highest percentage in the AFL. They can get themselves a couple of wins in the next couple of weeks. They can push themselves towards the 8, and the Giants right now are in some pretty poor form, so they really need to lift somewhere around the ground. Let's get to the statistics in this game, though. So Harry Himmelberg, top score with the 125, Nick Haynes with the 115, Lockie Whitfield with the 100, Ed Richards with the 97, Treloar with the 94, and then Cornelio with the 90. Now let's get to the votes. 3 votes went to Ed Richards, 2 votes to Adam Treloar, and the 1 vote went to James Harmes. Now the reason why I've given James Harmes the votes here is he was involved in so many scoring attempts for the Dogs throughout the day. He had 9 scorer involvements and also hit the scoreboard with 2 goals too. So that's why I got the 1 vote. But the Giants, I couldn't give a vote to any one of them. They were pretty poor throughout the whole afternoon. And you can see the likes of like Himmelberg having 30 touches and 12 marks, but they should have conceded a lot more. And if it wasn't for the fact that the Dogs missed so many opportunities in front of goal, this game would have been a 60-plus point win. After that, let's get to the Saints versus the Dockers, first game on Saturday night. And the Dockers did enough in the end to break away in the second half. They were a much more dominant team in the second half, the third and fourth quarter, and won by 17 points. 72-55. There was one injury concern from this game, which was Michael Frederick. He had a heavy hit in the middle of the ground from Jimmy Webster, and he did fail a HIA, so he was subbed off in the first quarter. Jimmy Webster's hit, there was nothing ill-toward about it. I think it was just a fair contest in the middle of the ground. It's just unfortunate that Frederick came off second best, so he'll be fine. I know a lot of people would say that they would obviously have that thought in their mind with the Jimmy Webster hit against Jai Simpkin in the pre-season, but there was nothing ill-toward there from Jimmy Webster. He did everything he could to try and get the ball, and unfortunately, Frederick was just sitting in the wrong position at the time. Let's get to the game, though. The Saints did start the better of the two sides, kicking the only 2 goals in the first 20 minutes of the game, but didn't take full advantage of their territory, and the Dockers kicked 3 late goals and saw them have an 8-point lead at quarter time. The Saints did regain the lead with the first 2 goals of the second term, but a late goal from the Dockers actually saw them regain the lead and take a 3-point lead into half-time. And again, the Saints in the third quarter took the early advantage. They kicked 2 quick goals, but the Dockers quickly responded with one of their own. But then the Dockers started to absolutely control the game but missed a huge amount of opportunities. It's been kind of the tail of the round at the moment. They kicked 6 straight behinds, and the scores were actually level at three-quarter time. It was 7 goals 5 to 6 goals 11. So the Dockers really had opportunities to kill this game in a low-scoring contest. Now, Freo continued to control the game in the final term, but still missed quite a few opportunities. They kicked 3 goals 7 in the final term, but it was enough in the end to stay in front of the Saints and win by 17 points. But let's look at the second half scoring shots to show. Really, the Dockers could have won this by 40 plus points. The Dockers kicked 4 goals 12 in the second half, and St Kilda only kicked 3 goals 4. So that's 2 weeks in a row now that the Dockers have butchered it in front of goal. And it was really capped off by Jai Amos, who's been pretty well known as a really good straight goal kicker. He kicked 2 goals 5 in the end. So he needs to improve on his goal kicking, but really good performance from the Dockers in the end. And St Kilda, yet another loss, and finals are probably out of reach now. Let's get to the statistics in this game. Top scorer, massive performance from Rowan Marshall, probably their best player. He got 171. Jordan Clark got the 141. Really good response from his getting tagged last week. Luke Ryan with the 126. Jack Sinclair with the 118. Luke Jackson with the 116. Wanganeen Miller with the 110. And Riley Bonner with the 109. Now let's get to the votes. 3 votes did go to Rowan Marshall. Really good performance from him in a losing side. Hayden Young got the 2 votes. And the 1 vote did go to Alex Pearce. Now the reason why I've given Alex Pearce the 1 vote here is he kept Max King goalless throughout the whole afternoon. Even when he started to look pretty threatening in the first half, Alex Pearce really responded in the second half. He kept Max King to only 3 touches, didn't let him take a mark, and was just so much better throughout the whole afternoon. It looked like Max King, this could have been the game that he was maybe going to break open, but Alex Pearce really shut him down. He's such a great defender and had a really good performance in the end. And finally on Saturday night, we have the Brisbane Lions up against the Tigers, and the Lions against a depleted Richmond side absolutely killed them in the end. 163 to 44, 119 point win. Massive win from the Lions in the end. There were a few injury concerns again on Richmond's side, which is really disappointing. It was Lafau, who did get a jaw injury and was subbed out at halftime. And then we also had Ryan Mansell, who received a head injury and did not play the entire game. So really disappointing for Richmond. Another couple of injuries. It's really concerning. They're really piling up. And right now, I think it would be a very interesting game if North Melbourne were playing Richmond next week. Who would win that game? We'll get to the talking points. There's not a lot, really. I mean, the game was done in the first 20 minutes. The Lions kicked 6 quick goals, and the game was basically done. It really started the rampant run from the Lions that they had all night. The Lions kicked 10 goals on the board before the Tigers finally got their first goal in the second term through Noah Bolter. But like I said, there's not a lot to talk about this game. The Tigers are incredibly depleted. It's really tough on Adam Uze. I know a lot of people are talking about how he's had a really tough start and how it's been a lot of his fault. I get things like effort, and I think it's really tough for Richmond to give effort, and I think it's going to be a really big talking point in the off-season what Richmond do with their older players, because right now they're at all sorts and they have to reinvent the wheel now because their 2020 premiership seems so far away, even though it was only 4 years ago. But the Lions, great performance from them. They did what they had to do. They had an easy kill in front of them, and they took it, and they did really well. They increased their percentage, which may be important towards the end of the year if they can break back into the 8. The Lions did kick 26 goals throughout the whole evening and recorded a massive 119-point win, which I think is a record for the Lions. So great win from them in the end. Let's look at the statistics in this game. Dane Zorko top score with the 148. He's having a massive year. Lachie Neale with the 122. He had 6 goal assists as well. Joe Danaher with the 119. Josh Dunkley with the 105. Kai Lohman with the 99. 5 goals as well from him. Great performance. And Darcy Wilmot with the 96. Now let's get to the votes. 3 votes went to Dane Zorko, 2 votes to Kai Lohman, and 1 vote went to Lachie Neale. So guys, let's get to Sunday, and the first game on Sunday was the Bombers against North Melbourne. And North Melbourne, despite a pretty gallant first half, the Bombers were able to break away with an 8-goal third quarter, which really broke the game open. And in the end, they won by 40 points. 106 to the Bombers, 66 to North Melbourne. There was one injury concern from this game, which was Miller Bergman. He did get a hamstring injury, and he was out of the game in the third quarter. So pretty disappointing for him. He just got back into the lineup, but now he will be out for a couple of weeks, you would say. Let's get to the game itself, though. So North Melbourne in the first quarter were really competitive. They actually took the lead twice in the first quarter, but a couple of late goals for the Bombers saw them take a 12-point lead into quarter time. North Melbourne again was staying pretty strong. The Bombers broke out to just over a 20-point lead, but a couple of late goals actually brought the lead back to under 2 goals, and in fact, they were only down by 7 points at halftime, North Melbourne. But then the 8-goal quarter of Essendon in that third term really broke the game open. They had a 45-point lead at three-quarter time, and then in the final quarter, the Bombers just played a little bit safe, and in the end, they didn't really break away. But nonetheless, it was a good performance from Essendon. They didn't play at their best, but they did enough just to record a pretty convincing win by 40 points against North Melbourne, who were very good. This is one of their better performances of the year, North Melbourne. Luke Davies-Uniacke doesn't get into the votes, but he was one of their best. He was great. So let's look at the statistics. And on the AFL Fantasy front, of course, we have Zach Fisher top scoring with the 121, Harry Sheasel with the 119, Peter Wright with the 115, Luke Davies-Uniacke with the 113, Caldwell with the 105, and then Archie Perkins with the 100. Now let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes went to Peter Wright, massive performance with his 4 goals. 2 votes went to Mac Welfie. He had so many score involvements in this game. He was involved in nearly every single score for Essendon, it felt like, at stages, so he got the 2 votes. And Jai Caldwell got the 1. Now let's get to the next game, and oh boy, what a comeback from Port Adelaide. You would not have expected the fact that Hawthorn had such a big lead in this game, and then for Port Adelaide to steal it at the final moment to get a massive win. They really needed this win, Port Adelaide. They had a massive win against Geelong last week, but Port Adelaide stole it in the final moments from Darcy Byrne-Jones' soccer goal to win it by 1 point. 80 Port Adelaide, 79 to Hawthorn. They will rue this loss, Hawthorn. At one stage, they had a 41-point lead late in the third term, but Port Adelaide clawed it right back and were able to steal it. There was one injury concern from this game. It was Ollie Wines, who was actually subbed off at quarter time with heart palpitations. That's really concerning for Ollie Wines. Hopefully everything's all good and maybe he'll be back in a couple of weeks, but really concerning there for Ollie Wines. But let's get to the game. Hawthorn had a massive first quarter. They kicked 6 goals to 1, led by 31 points at quarter time, and it felt like maybe an upset was brewing. And in the second term, it got a little bit more tighter. Port Adelaide actually won the quarter by kicking a late goal. But unfortunately, it still felt like for Port Adelaide that they just weren't on the pace of the game. They just felt like they weren't involved in it. And Hawthorn were actually playing some decent football, especially their midfielders. They were right on top of Port Adelaide, and Hawthorn led by 22 points at half-time. Then in the third quarter, this is when Hawthorn started to break away. They, at one stage, late in the third term, had a 41-point lead, and you felt like this was going to be it. It felt like Port Adelaide were just off on this game. They thought they were going to cruise up and win this game, but 2 late goals to Port Adelaide set up for an interesting finish. They were down by 28 points at three-quarter time. Then Port Adelaide, took them a while to get their first goal, but once they got that first goal of the quarter, then they started to really get their way back. They did kick 4 goals, 6 in the last quarter, so they very well could have smashed Hawthorn, but in the end, Hawthorn, the problem was they just stopped. Sam Mitchell sent Blake Hardwick, who kicked 5 goals to three-quarter time, back, which was trying to save the game, and Port Adelaide were able to run over the top in the end. They kicked 2 goals in the final 30 seconds to steal the game. Massive win for Port Adelaide because, like I said, if they didn't win this one, they're going to be right in the pack. So a great win from Port Adelaide. Hawthorn rue some crucial chances to win this game late. So really poor from Hawthorn. They were good for 3 quarters, but if you don't play the 4 quarters against a good side like Port Adelaide, it will cost you in the end. Now let's get to the statistics in this game, of course. Dan Houston top score with the 136, Blake Hardwick with the 132, Jason Horne-Francis with the 112 along with Zach Butters, Will Day with the 109, and then Lloyd Meek, who's in really good form, got the 108. Now let's get to the votes in this game. This was really tough. But in the end, I thought the 3 votes deserved to go to Blake Hardwick. He was massive for Hawthorn with the 5 goals. He had 23 touches as well. And almost saved them the game in the back half in the last quarter, but just couldn't in the end. So we got 3 votes. 2 votes went to Jason Horne-Francis. He was Port Adelaide's best player, in my opinion. And then the 1 vote, 3 goals off half-back, by the way, from Dan Houston. Great performance from him as well. But Port Adelaide, they saved, not this season, but they lost a lot of embarrassment if they lost this game. Let's just put it that way. And then we get to the final game of round 10, and a big upset this one. West Coast Eagles up against Melbourne. The West Coast Eagles were able to run away in the end to win by 35 points over the Demons, 105-70. We did stream this game as well. Massive performance from the West Coast Eagles. They are very hard to beat at home, and right now, West Coast led throughout the whole night and were able to win by 35 points. So a great performance from the West Coast Eagles, and they'll upset some teams this year. That was a great performance from them. Let's get to the game itself, though. So the West Coast Eagles really started well. They kicked the first couple of goals of this game. Melbourne just looked a little bit lethargic at times. They were getting well beaten around the contest in the middle of the ground. Players like Oliver, Petrarca, Sparrow, and the more experienced midfielders were getting smashed by the West Coast Eagles midfielders. And it just felt like there was something off about Melbourne. At quarter time, they were down by 14 points. And West Coast continued their hot form with the first 2 goals of the second term to take a pretty convincing lead, almost 30 points. The Demons quickly fought back, though. They kicked 3 quick goals to get right back under 10 points, and you felt like this is maybe when the Demons are going to make their charge. But the Eagles, to their credit, they steadied. They did really well and took a 13-point lead at halftime. Then in the third quarter, the Eagles started to break away again. It felt like maybe the Eagles did enough. They got up past 20 points, and it felt like at this point maybe the Eagles were going to be too good. Again, the Demons fought their way back with 2 quick goals, but the Eagles were just too good. They just held their nerve. They were strong through the middle of the ground, led by Harley Reid and Jake Waterman, who were massive, and a late goal from Harley Reid in the third term kind of made it that point that it just felt like the Eagles were going to hold on. They led by 18 points at three-quarter time, the Eagles, and then into the last quarter, the Demons really didn't fire a shot, in my opinion. They kicked 1 goal in the last quarter, the Demons, and the Eagles, I think, were just able to shut this down. When it got forward for the Eagles any time throughout the last quarter, they just locked it in their forward half for 5-10 minutes, and the Demons just couldn't break through. I don't think they'll make finals this year. I think they're too far away from it, and I don't think they can win any away games this year. But they're brewing something West Coast, and they're a really good team to watch. And let's get to the statistics in this game now, guys. Top scorer in the end was Jake Waterman with the 126, Jack Darling with the 111, Liam Duggan with the 110, Tim Kelly with the 107, Jamie Cripps with the 105, and then Jack Viney with the 98. But let's get to the votes in this game, the final game of round 10. 3 votes went to Jake Waterman, 2 votes went to Harley Reid, and the 1 vote went to Tim Kelly. Now, you might think, why has Harley Reid got 2 votes here? You'd look at the statistics, you wouldn't think that he's done a lot. I mean, he did have 21 touches, kicked 2 goals. He was the most impactful player on the ground for a lot of it. Every time he's around the ball, Melbourne players couldn't tackle him. This guy is a 9th gamer, and he's breaking tackles from Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver. He was brilliant. He brought the energy for the West Coast Eagles early in the game, and the Demons were, competing quite nicely. But in the end, Harley Reid was a class above a lot of the Demons midfielders throughout the night. So a great performance from Harley Reid. But of course now, guys, let's move to the ladder after round 10. And it is the Sydney Swans on top on 36 points, 9-1. I can't believe the only Swans loss this year is against Richmond. They lead 6 points over second place, Essendon on the 30 points. Geelong is still in 3rd spot despite losing their last 3 games. Port Adelaide, with that come from behind stealing win, are in 4th spot on 28 points. Collingwood with a big win against the Crows are on 26 points. The Giants are in 6th on 24, along with Melbourne in 7th, the Gold Coast in 8th, Fremantle in 9th, and Carlton right back in 10th. I don't think anyone would have seen Carlton in 10th spot at this stage of the season so far. But there's a real logjam in that spots right now, so that's going to be interesting. The Bulldogs on a massive percentage of 126 sit in 11th. The Brisbane Lions starting to brew something. They are in 12th. The Crows, after a heartbreaking loss, are in 13th on 14 points. St Kilda, who have had a dismal season so far, are in 14th with 12 points, along with Hawthorn in 15th, and West Coast, with that big win, are in 16th on 12 points. And then right down the bottom are the Tigers with the 1 win so far in 17th. And North Melbourne are in 18th spot with a dreadful percentage of 56.8. But guys, that's basically all we have for the review of round 10. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, guys, make sure to do it now. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We are so close, so I really do appreciate the support. So make sure to subscribe and like if you are on YouTube. If you are listening to this on Spotify, make sure to leave us 5 stars and make sure to follow as well so you're notified on the podcast and, of course, the review. But that is all from me, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. But we will catch you all next round.